First of all, I would like to thank you all for taking your time to attend this webinar. I would also like to say a big thank you to our partner, Health Product Associate Global, for organizing and inviting us to give this webinar. So by way of introduction, my name is Jing, and I'll be the speaker today. And today we will mainly cover these 5 topics, including policy trends in CBEC for health foods, GACC overseas manufacturer registration, process and timeline for imported health food registration and filing, and some common issues and solutions in imported health food filing. And in the end, I will share some successful case on imported health food and also cover the estimated timeline and service fee. So for the first topic, let's start with the basics. What exactly is a health food under Chinese law? According to the National Food Safety Standard GB 16740, a health food is defined as a food that claims to have specific health benefits or is intended to supplement vitamins and minerals. It is formulated for particular population groups, helps regulate bodily functions, and is not meant to treat any disease, and causes no acute, subacute, or chronic health effect to human body. And different countries often use different terminology for these products. In China, we call them health foods, but internationally, they might be more often referred to as dietary supplements or functional foods. And in recent years, rising health awareness among Chinese consumers has driven rapid growth in the domestic health food market. Overseas products in particular have gained strong traction because of their wide variety and innovative formulations. At the same time, however, regulations governing these imported products are tightening. So different countries, so imported health food can enter China through 2 routes. The first is general trade, formal import pathway that require full compliance with all Chinese regulations. And the second is cross-border ecommerce, CBEC, which includes bounded warehouse and direct shipping. You may recognize them by their code, which is 1210 or 69610. I think there are 2 more CBEC modes, but the main ones are these 2. And since these 2 modes share very similar regulatory requirements, we often refer to them collectively as the CBEC pathway. So the most obvious difference between these 2 routes is that products imported by general trade can be sold through both online and offline channels across China, including pharmacies, supermarkets, and other physical sites. And in contrast, CBEC products can only be sold through online platforms and are not permitted to enter the domestic physical distribution chain for a secondary sale. And with that in mind, let's take a closer look at the differences between these 2 pathways from 6 key dimensions. So the first one is overseas manufacturer qualification. Under the general trade, it is mandatory for overseas health food manufacturer facilities to complete GACC registration. For CBEC, however, it is not mandatory. And second one is the product access requirements. For general trade, health food must obtain a health food registration or filing certificate from SAMR, commonly known as the Blue Hat Certificate. And in contrast, CBEC products are regulated as personal use imported goods under Decree number 486 and are temporarily exempt from registration or filing. And the third one is custom clearance requirement. For general trade, clearance requires verification of the Blue Hat Certificate, Certificate of Origin, Freestyle Certificate, test report, Chinese label, plus other requirements. But CBEC clearance is much more streamlined. It only requires basic documents such as ecommerce enterprise filing and the Chinese electronic label. And the fourth one is the label requirement. The general trade must have a Chinese label that fully complies with Chinese regulatory requirements, but for CBEC, there is no mandatory Chinese labeling requirement, and the labels may remain in the original language. And the fifth one is the health function claim. For general trade, only the health function is that approved on the Blue Hat certificate may be claimed. For CBEC, without the Blue Hat, no house function claims whatsoever are permitted, and any mention of disease prevention or treatment is strictly prohibited. So you may ask, if we cannot make any health claim, how can we market our products effectively through CBEC? So in practice, CBEC brands often rely on more flexible promotional approaches. Instead of making direct health function claim, they leverage social media influencer endorsement, content marketing, and other creative storytelling strategies. So commonly referred to in China as planting grass, 种草, and which means generating consumer interest through authentic recommendations and user experience. And this method allows brands to build awareness and trust without crossing regulatory lines. And the sixth one is ingredient requirement. The general trade ingredients must be officially approved or listed in Chinese regulations. But for CBEC products, it may contain new food ingredients not yet approved in China, but they must be included in the catalog of retail import commodities via CBEC, also known as the positive list, and must not contain any prohibited substance. And a very common question we get is, are CBEC rules getting looser or tighter? So in our view, the basic entry framework remains the same, but food chain compliance enforcement is tightening across the board. There are three major signals which we will be explaining a bit more in the coming slides. So signal one is that the first signal is Custom Decree 280 takes effect and the source control continues to tighten. On June the 1st, 2026, Decree number 280 officially came into force, replacing the previous Decree 248. It requires all food imported via general trade must declare the GACC registration number. Without it, custom clearance is not permitted. Although CBEC still remains exempt from mandatory GACC requirements, in practice, we are already seeing several Chinese ports refusing the entry of products from unregistered overseas manufacturers. So our recommendation here is twofold. First, check the specific requirement of your intended entry port in advance. And second, if required, complete GACC registration for a general food category that is closest to your product type. This will help you avoid potential disruption. And the second signal is the strengthened control on 20+ key monitored ingredients. Beyond the positive list we previously talked about, Chinese custom has also established a list of key monitored ingredients, which includes over 20 substances, such as the very popular NMN, melatonin, coenzyme Q10, PQQ, ashwagandha, and also ergothioneine. And for products contain any of these ingredients, 3 documents are mandatory, regardless of whether you're importing it use the general trade or CBEC. And these include a certificate of origin, free sale certificate, and an official evidence of consumption or use in the country of origin. And in addition, a food ingredient test report is also often required. If any of this document is missing, the shipment may be detained or returned. And the third signal is the platform compliance upgrades with the further crackdown on fake foreign brands. Following the usage incidents in 2026, which is a popular supplement brand marketed as 100% Australian imported, that was exposed by the state media as being actually manufactured in China. All major e-commerce platforms have significantly tightened their merchant qualification reviews afterwards. So the old model of loose entry strict management has now been replaced by strict entry strict management and continuous monitoring, combining pre-qualification audits, physical site inspections, and dynamic patrol checks. For example, the in-global purchase now requires dual certificate for all CBEC health food brands, both proof of overseas production and proof of overseas distribution. Failure to provide these documents can lead to immediate product removal, store suspension, or even a permanent ban. To put it simply, in the past, showing a production certificate was enough to open an online store. And now you must prove that the product is genuinely sold in its country of origin, not just white labeled for the Chinese market. And to wrap up this section, in the short term, CBEC remains the easiest entry channel, but compliance costs are rising and regulatory oversight is strengthening. And if you're looking for selling products in China for the long term, eventually we'll need to switch to general trade, which means obtaining both Blue Hat certificate and GACC registration to ensure sustainable market access. And now let's move on to the second topic, GACC registration. So it is the first mandatory step for general trade import. It is often confused with the Blue Hat registration or filing, but they are very different. So what is GACC registration and who must apply? GACC actually stands for the General Administration of Customs of the People's Republic of China. And it is the mandatory market access system for all overseas food production, processing, and storage enterprises exporting food to China under Decree 280. And the latest Decree 280 lists 17 categories of food that require official recommended registration. As shown on this slide, house food remain on the list, which means they require a recommendation letter from the competent authority of the origin country. And now let me reinforce the applicability. For general trade, export GACC registration is mandatory. Without a valid registration number, shipment can be rejected at custom clearance. But for CBEC only sales, it is not formally required. However, as we just discussed, enforcement is visibly tightening at the port level, so it's wise to treat it as a future necessity rather than an exemption. And for the required documentation for self-registration categories, which includes most food types other than the 17 recommended ones, the application dossiers typically include the following: basic enterprise information, such as company name, address, legal representative, and contact details, and also overseas manufacturer identity documentation, and also statement of compliance with the registration requirement. It is usually only need to tick the boxes in the system. And for product-specific documents, it includes product photos, labels, and formulation details, and supporting documents on food safety management system, production scope, and production capacity. But please note that these are only required upon request from GACC, and a few other supplementary items as needed. But for food categories that require official recommended registration, so an additional document is required, which is an official inspection report and a recommendation letter from the competent authority of the exporting country. In Canada, the local competent authority is often referred to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, CFIA, and in the US, we think it refers to the FDA. And this is a process flow diagram for self-registration. Basically, all general food categories not on the official recommendation list are eligible for it. And manufacturers can prepare the required documentation, apply for an account on the China Import Food Enterprise Registration System, which is also abbreviated as CIFER, and submit the documents online directly. During official review, you can see the status of your application, including any supplementary requests and feedback from GACC. And the total official review process typically takes around 1 month for a straightforward case. But for official recommended registration, including house food, you must first obtain an inspection report and formal recommendation letter from the local competent authority. Then submit the food application. GACC may also request conducting an on-site inspection if deemed necessary. For house food manufacturers, the whole process can take around 6 to 9 months in total, but it can be very quite unpredictable in practice because if corrections or on-site inspections are required, the timeline may be even longer. So what are the key updates in Decree 280 versus the previous Decree 248? The core principle of Decree number 280 can be summarized as stricter oversight where risk exists, but greater convenience for compliant operators. For law-abiding manufacturers, the overall process is now more efficient and streamlined, with 4 key changes. The first one is related to the food categories that require official recommended registration. Compared to the previous Decree 248, the new Decree 280 removes several primary edible agricultural products categories, including oilseeds, fresh preserved vegetables, dried beans, unroasted coffee beans, and cocoa beans. While the above product no longer requires the GACC registration, companies responsible for these and other primary edible agricultural products must be registered with GACC's Department of Animal and Plant Quarantine before export. And please note that the complete list is very extensive, so please refer to the Chinese quarantine registration list for more information. And the second update is that it becomes more convenient for the application process. Previously, all official recommended registration had to be submitted to GACC by the local competent authority directly to GACC. But under the new rule, manufacturers can register their own official system account and submit the application directly to GACC once they obtain the inspection report and official recommendation letter. And the third one is being the documentation becomes simplified, and proof of enterprise identity is no longer limited to business licenses. Official certification documents issued by competent authorities are also accepted. Information such as production capacity and production type is only required upon request instead of mandatory. And the fourth one is a new automatic renewal feature. GACC registration is generally valid for 5 years. For meat and bird nest products, automatic renewal is not permitted. However, for all other food categories, including house food, are eligible for automatic renewal. That means as long as you remain a clean compliance record, your registration will be automatically extended for another 5 years without the need to resubmit a full application again. And we also want to remind everyone here that while most details can be updated easily through the online system, there are 3 specific fields that GACC considers to have an impact on food safety. These are production facility address, legal representative, and the registration number issued by your local competent authority. The registration number issued must match exactly the number shown on your official production license or permit from the home country. If any of these 3 items need to be changed, you cannot simply modify them. GACC will not allow correction or change, and in that case, you will have to cancel the existing account and then register for a new GACC account and submit a completely new registration, which can cause disruption to the current exportation. And other information such as contact person or contact method can be updated directly in the system without any issue. And there are 2 critical tips for GACC registration under the health food category. The first one is it is important to note that all application materials must be submitted in Chinese or English. If the original documents are in another language, we usually recommend providing a translation. So it doesn't have to be an official translation. A clear, accurate translation is sufficient for custom review purpose, and it is applicable for all food categories. And the second tip is that when you apply for the health food category in the registration system, there's an upload field labeled as China Health Food Registration or Filling Certificate. The system marks this as optional, and therefore many companies may skip it. But after consulting directly with the custom, we can confirm that while it is not mandatory, customs may return the application during review and request the Blue Hat certificate to verify authenticity and consistency. So because GACC registration under health food category already take a long review period, being sent back for supplementary documents can cause unpredictable delays. So we strongly advise overseas manufacturer to complete the Blue Hat registration or filing first, then apply for the GACC registration. And there is a common misconception. And there is a very common misconception that GACC is a factory level qualification. It answers the question, can this factory export food to China? But it does not answer, can this product be sold as a health food in China? So to legally market and sell the imported products as a health food with function claims, overseas companies must also obtain the Blue Hat certification for their products. In another word, general trade import of health food requires both factory access via GACC and also product access via the Blue Hat certification, and both are mandatory. Now let's move on to the product level compliance, the Blue Hat certification. It can also be divided into two pathways, health food registration or filing. If we were to register or file an imported health food products, the applicant must be an overseas manufacturer or an entity that owns the product rights and meets the marketing requirement in its country of origin. It can be the actual manufacturer itself or brand owner that outsources the production. But the applicant must also appoint a Chinese agent, such as CRRS or your importer, to handle the application. And for imported products, filing is only available for vitamin and mineral supplements, plus DHA alcohol oil, and that's it. A very common question we get from overseas client is, can I file a coenzyme Q10 or fish oil product? Unfortunately, the answer to this question is no at the moment. Domestic Chinese brands can file this, but imported brands cannot. This is written into the upper level food safety law. If the imported health food products contain ingredients beyond the basic vitamins, minerals, and DHA alcohol oil, it must go through the full registration pathway. And now let's take a closer look at the current scope of health food filing in China. Filing is currently limited to nutrient supplements. This includes vitamins and minerals, the two core categories. However, it is also important to note that not only the types of vitamins and minerals are restricted, but also their sources and dosage must strictly comply with the requirements set out in the filing catalog. Take magnesium as an example. Many overseas products use magnesium citrate, but this form is currently not permitted for use in filing type health food in China. A special standalone item is beta-carotene. As you may know, beta-carotene is a precursor to vitamin A. It can be used either as a source of vitamin A or as a separate ingredient for beta-carotene supplementation. So beyond its nutritional role, beta-carotene also offers antioxidant and other benefits, so listing it separately may provide some marketing advantage. Another special item is DHA alcohol oil. It is eligible for filing, but its claim function is limited to supplementing polyunsaturated fatty acid. And in terms of the permitted dosage form, filing type products can be presented in a wide variety of formats, including tablets, hard capsules, soft gels, oral solutions, granules, gel, candies, and powders. And in practice, the range of accepted formats is even broader. For example, drops are typically considered a type of oral solution, and effervescent tablets are classified under the tablet category. So we always explore whether a product can be appropriately assigned to one of these established categories. And so the key limitations remains that filing is essentially restricted to nutrient-based products. Beyond the active nutrient, It is also important to note that the excipients used in house food must also comply with the permitted excipient list for filing eligible products. This means that even if the main active ingredients are acceptable, the choice of carriers, binders, or coating could affect the product's eligibility or filing. And that sums up the current filing landscape for house foods. And how about house food registration? Currently, for functional house foods, registration is mandatory. China currently allows exactly 24 approved health functions, and every registered product must fit into one of these 24 functions. You may select 2 functions for one product in one application, but this requires double the testing and formula justification. So we almost always recommend applying for one claim per product. If the function you are looking for isn't among these 24 health functions, there's also an option to apply for a new function. But this is extremely complex, requires multi-center clinical trials, and can cost over 10 million RMB. So to date, no companies has successfully completed new function application, and it is very hard and it is very difficult. And now let's take a look at the testing requirements associated with each of the 24 permitted health functions. Different health functions require different types of functional testing. For example, for the 13 health functions listed here, they require both animal function test and human function test. But for the rest 11 functions, it requires only one of the two, either an animal function test or a human function test, but not both. And a question we frequently get for the functional test is, can we conduct this test outside China, or will Chinese authority accept the testing we conduct previously in another country? The answer is still unfortunately no. For health food registration in China, all functional tests and toxicology tests must be conducted within China by laboratories that have proper qualifications and are registered or recognized by SAMR. In fact, we recommend conducting the test at one of the 58 accredited test institutions that are recognized by the authorities, as they are the most trusted and accepted. And furthermore, all tests must strictly follow the method described in Chinese regulations, so the requirements are actually quite rigorous. Beyond the function-specific test, all health foods, regardless of their function, must undergo a set of mandatory core tests, including the full testing of product technical specifications covering all indicators and tests for active or marker components, hygiene and stability studies, and also method validation and toxicology studies. And the biggest difference between filing and registration lie in the amount of testing required. For health food filing, the core testing requirement is 3-batch specification quality testing and a stability testing. We can use accelerated stability testing, which takes about 3 months to complete. With data analysis and report insurance, the total testing time is around 3.5 to 4 months. And self-testing reports are also acceptable for filing, as long as they meet Chinese specification requirements. We'll also need to include documents such as formula documents, production process, label drafts, and product quality specification. However, for health food registration, testing is much more comprehensive and time-consuming. Besides the 3 batches of specification quality testing and stability testing, food toxicology testing include the acute oral toxicity, 3 genome toxicity, and 28-day are required. Animal and human function tests matching the claim function are also required. So for registration, testing alone can take 1.5 years to 2 years in total before we can even submit an application. And these are the additional documentation requirements for imported health food registration and filing. And now let's walk through the full end-to-end process for both pathways. So the step 1 is feasibility assessment. We begin by reviewing the product's full formula, ingredients, and dosage against Chinese regulatory requirement. In many cases, overseas formulations need to be adjusted to meet China's specific limits for vitamins, minerals, and active ingredients. Our goal at this stage is to identify all required changes early before you invest time and money in testing. And step 2 is sample preparation and testing. This is usually where the timelines diverge significantly between filing and registration pathways. And the step 3 is dossier submission and technical review. Once testing is complete, we compile and submit the food application dossier to the SAMR for review. It is important to note that almost all applications receive at least one round of supplementation request. A well-prepared dossier usually goes through 1 to 2 rounds of correction, but a poorly prepared one can take 5 or more rounds, which can add several months of delay. And the final step is the approval, which also differ between the two pathways. For filing, once the technical review is complete, the filing certificate is issued directly, and no on-site inspection will be required. For registration, however, after the technical review, an on-site inspection of the overseas manufacturer will be required, along with confirmatory testing, and the file then goes to the SAMR for the final administrative approval and certificate issuance. And let's move on to the fourth topic, common issues and solutions in imported health food filing. So we'll be focusing primarily on health food filing today because it tends to be the more practical routes for many overseas health food brands. Drawing from our previous experience managing dozens of filing projects for overseas clients, I'd like to walk you through the 6 most frequently challenges that applicants typically encountered, and more importantly, how to address them effectively. The first issue is related to the inconsistent English or Chinese name and addresses of the applicant. Authority tends to review every detail of your application extremely careful. So even a small inconsistencies in company names or address between the business license, trademark documents, and application form can result in rejection. We recommend finalizing the exact official English name and address before creating the application account. Confirm consistency across all official seals, trademark certificate, and supporting documents. In addition, account information can be very difficult to modify afterwards. And the second issue is related to incorrect notarization and apostille procedure. Overseas supporting documents often require notarization by a local notary public, followed by embassy or apostille certificate. For Hague Convention countries like the US and Canada, a lot of documents used for filing is actually issued by law firm. A common mistake is having the same person who drafted the documents also perform the notarization. This is not accepted by the Chinese authority. And we usually recommend solving this by separating the document drafter and the notary public. By the way, we will provide the standardized templates to ensure the content of these documents to meet Chinese requirements when we help clients with the health food filing. And another common issue relates to the clean room classification and GMP discrepancies between the country of origin and China. For manufacturing process documentation, the Chinese authority requires that the applicant to clearly define clean room zones and cleanliness grades. Importantly, these must be labeled according to the actual production workshop in the product's country of origin, while also need to meet the Chinese regulatory standard. This can become challenging when the two sets of requirements do not align perfectly. For example, Canadian manufacturers operate under the Natural Health Products Regulations, which do not always correspond exactly with Chinese health food GMP requirements. So our approach here to this is a structural gap analysis. We conduct a side-by-side comparison between the local GMP standard and Chinese requirements. Where parameters differ, we provide supporting evidence, such as routine environmental monitoring data to demonstrate that the actual production conditions consistently meet Chinese standard. And this strategy has proven effective in our past projects, and it has been accepted by the Chinese authorities without further challenge. And the fourth key point is related to the proof of marketing for at least 1 year. To apply for imported household filing, applicant must demonstrate that the products has been legally marketed in the original country for at least 1 year, and this proof is typically issued by a law firm rather than a government authority. It is critical that the document uses the correct local regulatory category and terminology for health food products. For instance, in Canada, the products must be referred to as a natural health product and not simply as a food or health food. A common challenge arises when the product does not meet specific Chinese requirements and need to be reformulated. In that case, the new formula technically has no sales history. So how do we satisfy this 1 year rule? And our solution here is very straightforward. Launch the reformulated version in the home market as soon as the final formulation is confirmed. There's no minimum sales volume or specific channel requirements. As long as the product is legally on the market, you can then use that 1 year window to complete all necessary testing and dossier preparation. So no time will be wasted. And the fifth common issue we encounter is related to the labeling image quality. During the filing application, you are required to upload scanned images of the original product labels. However, if the uploaded images are blurry or have low resolution, the authority will issue a correction request, and that adds unnecessary delays. Our recommendation is to always submit high-resolution scans of the label. In cases where the label is too small or crowded, we recommend breaking it down into separate enlarged image of each section, accompanied by clear explanations. This ensures that every detail from ingredient list to usage instruction is fully legible and leaves no room for misinterpretation. And the last issue is the oversized tablet specification. For very large tablets, typically refers to 1.4 or 1.5 grams or above. Chinese authorities may raise safety concerns about swallowing risk for adult consumers. To solve this, we can prepare a written justification in advance, analyzing tablet shapes, coating, and recommended method of consumption to demonstrate the product is safe for direct oral use. And all of these issues can be resolved before submission. If you work with an experienced partner who knows what officials are looking for, preparing for them in advance is always much faster and cheaper than responding to supplementation comments later. And to wrap up our final content, let's briefly share a few real success cases from overseas clients we have supported. We have successfully completed imported health food filing projects for many leading brands such as Kirkland and Jamieson from Canada, Asmon Natural Nutrition Seasons from the US, and also products from Japan, Korea, Australia, and Taiwan. These projects cover a range of scenarios. For example, this is how a Blue Hat certificate looks like once the application is approved. And as can be seen, this is one of the products where the applicant and the manufacturer are the same. And for this one, the products where the name of the applicant and manufacturer are actually, this one is still the same. But for this one, the applicant and the manufacturer are actually different. And we also cover multiple dosage forms such as tablets, soft gels, gel candies, and effervescent tablets. And in our fastest case, it only takes 1.5 months from submission to obtaining the certificate. But in most cases, the official review process, including supplementation, will take 3 to 5 months after submission. And now let's walk you through the estimated timeline and cost if we were to assist you with the health food filing. As mentioned earlier, the whole filing process takes about 1 year from project kickoff to obtaining the certification. And our fees are mainly divided into two parts. First, our agency service fee. We offer a full service package. You can provide us with the essential technical documents, for example, product specification, which we will adjust to align with Chinese regulatory requirements and manufacturing process. And based on this, we prepare the entire dossier, handle the submission, communicate with the authorities, and follow through until the product receives the filing certificate. And our package service fee for this is approximately 9,000 USD. And second is the testing cost. This includes full specification testing for 3 batches, covering the nutrient content, microbiology, heavy metals, and other required parameters. Accelerated stability testing for 3 batches. And the good news is that we can accept test reports conducted overseas. And together, these tests usually cost around 9,000 USD as well. So for normal health food filing, say a calcium or vitamin products, the total cost typically falls within 18,000 USD. And for more complex products such as multivitamin with multiple minerals, the testing cost may be slightly higher. And let's look at the registration pathway, which is significantly longer and more expensive. The preparation phase alone, including the feasibility analysis, sample preparation, and all the required testing, takes about 1 to 1.5 years. And after submission, when you go through multiple rounds of technical review, possibly an on-site inspection, and finally the administrative approval process at the national level, the post-submission stage also takes more than a year. So even in the most ideal case, the entire registration timeline is about 2 to 3 years. And in terms of cost, registration is roughly about 100,000 to 150,000 USD, and broken down as follows. Our agency service fee is about 45,000 USD. It is also higher than the filing pathway because the workload is much greater, and the testing cost is about 60,000 USD. And this covers the 3-batch specification, stability testing, toxicology test, and also 1 animal efficacy test. And if human clinical trials are required, you will need to add an additional 45,000 USD on top of that. So bringing the total testing fee to around 105,000 USD in total. So in short, filing is faster and far more affordable, while registration demands a much longer timeline and significantly larger budget. And now we come to the end of our session. To sum up our content and recommendation, for general trade, health food manufacturers are required to complete both the GACC official recommended registration for the manufacturer and the health food product registration or filing. This is complex and time-consuming process, and a true marathon that demands significant resource and patience. But by contrast, CBEC currently does not require GACC registration or product-level Blue Hat approval, and the process is much simple, which translates into lower upfront compliance cost, less time investment, and greater flexibility in ingredient selection. So for overseas brands looking to test the Chinese market quickly, CBEC remains an attractive entry option. However, the Chinese regulations are steadily tightening, and CBEC requirements are increasingly aligning with the compliance standard for general trade. This webinar is intended to help you stay ahead of these regulatory shifts so that you are not caught off guard. And for companies that have long-term ambitions in China, and especially those aiming to enter physical retail channels such as the pharmacies and supermarkets, the ultimate pathway is still the general trade. Transitioning earlier rather than later will position your business for sustainable success and a more stable future in this dynamic market. So thank you all for your patience today, and we hope you have a really nice day. And we look forward to supporting your entry into the Chinese market.